Welcome back to my channel. I'm your host, G.I. Wingnut. Obviously, no intro. There's not going to be an outro. I'm obviously not in the studio. Um, First off, let me address the title of this video. The answer to Chaos Magic is the Philosopher's Stone. And yes, this is a channel update because I'm going in a wildly different direction. Um, I've been working a long time to get into this position. Um, and by the way, moving to St. Louis happened to be the answer that I needed. I'm sitting out here at one of these beautiful parks, getting ready to talk about some beautiful people that I'm connected with. But first off, let me address this whole Chaos Magic and Philosopher's Stone thing that I've got in the title. So I've done a lot of research. As an anthropologist and a researcher, that's just what I do. I mean, I want to understand how the brain works. I want to understand how people work and how some people influence other people, which is why during my deconstruction, I got deep into doing comparative cult studies. What does this cult teach? What does that cult teach? Somebody tried to tell me once, uh, or asked me, how if you can't, you need to put numbers on it. If you can't put numbers on it, how can you compare them? So I rattled three cults off the top of my head that teach UFO doctrines and three that don't. That's how you do comparisons. I'm already starting to ramble. That's why I've got some notes here. So, to the Philosopher's Stone, philosophy versus magic. Um, Alchemy. I don't know that alchemy was exactly about in its original form was necessarily about try to find a way to transmute lead into gold. I think it's more philosophical than that. Although people who've tried to run down the doctrines have driven themselves crazy, or the ideas. For example, Rosicrucianism fell out of alchemy. So did modern medicine and modern science. Alchemy was originally about blending things to make new stuff. The idea of the philosopher's stone being able to change everything actually runs into a rather interesting concept that I find of transmutation versus transition. Now, are, are is the intent of the philosopher's stone to change what can be changed and figure out what can't be changed? Is that what's going on? Is it more about a transition from what one doesn't know to what one learns through these experiments? And we know throughout history, plenty of experiments have gone wrong or have gone in a direction where they've been misused or weaponized. Nuclear power, for example, nuclear power generation versus, sorry about the shaky phone, it's breezy out here in the park, and I'm using my cheaper tripod right now. But anyway, you can use nuclear ionization to create electricity, but then you've got the nuclear waste that takes forever to decompose. And so, for that reason, nuclear power is not one of the better environmental options. That said, that nuclear power can also be utilized for things like spent uranium rounds, which are technically, militarily speaking, strategic nuclear devices. Extremely strategic because they're not explosive, but they do leave that ionizing radiation behind. That's probably how Bo Biden and a lot of other Navy pilots and veterans have wound up with cancer because they've worked with depleted uranium artillery rounds or on their A-10s or their F-18s. So um, there's a lot of nuance going on there as far as alchemy being magic versus philosophy, because Arthur C. Clarke stated that any technology sufficiently advanced enough is imperceptible from magic, implying that magic could just be a technology that we don't understand. It was through my deconstruction from the conspiracy theory community that that was accelerated by my understanding of the teachings of Helena Blavatsky and how they were applied later and filtered down through and utilized for mass control. So I think it's less. I think the Philosopher's Stone is more about the transmutation of oneself, evolution of one's mind, so to speak, the evolution of one's understanding of the environment around them, which is the core of science. Um, with the scientific method being, if somebody did this experiment and got this result, I should be able to do the same experiment and get the same result. I should be able to repeat the experiment a number of times and have limited fails. If the same experiment keeps failing and I keep trying it, then it's me who's falling short because I'm not recognizing that this particular experiment does not work. So, back to the concept of the philosophy of the Philosopher's Stone. My girlfriend made me aware of a philosophy from Japan. Chop wood, gain enlightenment, chop wood, which has a number of variations. You could say wash dishes, gain enlightenment, wash dishes. But no matter how you frame it, it's still about going back to doing what you did before once you get to that knowledge that you're looking for. And that's not to say don't continue looking for increased knowledge, but don't let that pursuit for knowledge distract you from your original goals in life, especially if your original goals in life are socially constructive. So, what I'm trying to get at is, in my personal opinion, I think we are each our own individual philosopher's stone. You are a philosopher's stone. And you have the power to, through action, and I'm going to get to that, through action, actually make an impact on the environment around you, change it for the better, or as we've seen, for the worse, when there is a lack of community cohesion. So, I'm going to get to that. I'm rambling. Next category that I wanted to discuss real quick. Groundskeepers are out running around doing a great job taking care of this park. I appreciate them. Doctrine versus dogma. So, I appreciate those who find themselves dedicated to whatever doctrine it is they feel like they need to dedicate their life to. There again, going back to that gaining enlightenment and going back to what it is you know, and what it is you love, what you did before you did your search. Doctrine is important. And yeah, I'm going to try not to get ahead of myself. But dogma, on the other hand, is that ideological lockstep, which I'm just going to quote Voltaire. Those, and this is probably a paraphrase, not an exact quote, but Voltaire said something to the effect of, those who can convince people of absurd things, can convince people to commit great atrocities. We can look through history and see that. But when it comes to sticking to your doctrine or your dogma, or being doctrine-based versus dogmatically based, versus being scientifically minded, as in you are allowed to change your mind when new evidence is presented that is contradictory yet verifiable in reference to what it is you think you know. It is okay to let go of your cognitive dissonance. It is okay also to present in a reasonable, healthy debate format to present counter information. And there are those like YouTube channel MC Tunes. They do a lot of videos about flat earthers, and just within the last couple of days, as of the day of this recording, MC Tunes did a video about the final experiment. If you don't know what that is, that was a bunch of flat earthers and a bunch of globe earthers got together down in Antarctica this past winter. Well, it would have been summer in the southern hemisphere, but winter where I'm from, here in the northern hemisphere. But and they witnessed the 24-hour sun. And the fallout from that, I've been waiting to see the fallout. And there was a lot of cognitive dissonance. But there apparently are quite a few flat earthers that came out and they're like, all right, so I was wrong. And they have completely changed their approach. Then again, there is also that narrow band that just is not going to let go. They're going to lean into it was holograms or it was done in a studio or something because they don't want to let go of their cognitive dissonance. They're not willing to let go of their grift. Somebody commented on one of the platforms that I interact on that the whole flat Earth debate has gotten to a point because they themselves, this individual themselves have been waiting for a flat earther to explain how time zones work, much less how the sun and moon stay in these magical orbits over this piece of Earth, since gravity doesn't happen. And anyway, the argument always boils down to because the Bible told me so, and that's the struggle with some of the other things that I've been working to try to. It doesn't. If somebody's convinced, they're convinced. There's not a whole lot you can do about it. That said, not long ago, the people over there in the alt-right were talking about how empathy is toxic. Empathy is not toxic. I'm working into that. I also want to bring up in this category the idea of heresy hunting versus culture wars. All right. So when I was in MAGA, when I was deep into all that live streaming stuff, all that cult stuff, there's this whole culture war thing. Oh, Disney's gone woke. Oh, we're gonna shoot up these cans of Bud Light because they put a transgender girl on the can. Whatever. I mean, I got into some of that, but it got to a point where I was just like, wait, this is just getting too crazy for me. And then a few things happened, and I put both feet on the brakes and jumped off the train when Trump was talking about putting homeless people in national forests. So that gets me back to that doctrine and dogma versus doctrine versus dogma versus culture wars. And I need to pause for a moment. Okay, I'm back. The wind just kicked up. Let me see if I can stabilize this a little better. That was a rather wonderful interlude. I just had a fantastic conversation with a very wonderful individual. So, let's see, where was I? Oh yeah, heresy hunting versus culture war. So, in MAGA, culture war is a big thing because change is a big thing. And I get that some folks really want to hang on to their old school Disney cartoons, and I'll get back to that later. In deference to all these remakes, and I think it is kind of silly that Disney keeps doing these remakes, these live action remakes. It amazed me the other day. I was looking for a particular. Oh, we got sirens. Hang on a second. I'll be right back. Well, turns out that was an ambulance. All right, so back to heresy hunting and culture wars. Now, I understand why people believe doctrine matters, and I totally get it. There are a lot of people that have been misled by false teachers within the Christian ideology, and there goes that ambulance again. I don't know what's up. Anyway, I hope whoever is in need gets the help they need. But I understand the absolute commitment to doctrine and calling out false teachers. I've gotten to a point, though, where personally I feel like heresy hunting feels to me very much like the culture war. I'll try to expound on that later, because it has to do with the local networking that I'm doing. So what I'm more focused on now, and it's been a grind for a while, but it's the abuses that are happening in the churches that are being covered up by the different establishments. And this was something that came up in a conversation yesterday in a Zoom meeting that I was in. All these different people that are harming other humans in the name of Jesus. We've got Chris Reed, Robert Morris, we got Joni Lamb and Mike Bickle, and Dr. Michael Brown. We got John MacArthur, and I really shouldn't have said Dr. Michael Brown. I should have said Michael Brown, but people know him better by his theological title. And I think MAGA was given Jill Biden grief for being a doctor of English. Anyway, the hypocrisies. It's just endless. It's ridiculous. But anyway, I'm more concerned about the abuses that happen in the churches and how they're covered up and the aftermath of that the victims have to deal with. How like in one of the testimonies that was offered in Jeff City just a few days ago, I shared it up in the posts section on my YouTube channel. But non-disclosure agreements and okay, I'll get into that in the next section. But yeah, the abuses and the aftermath. That's the core of my activism as an advocate against domestic and sexual violence and human trafficking. I'm gonna add more under that in a moment when I get to the local networking part. And it's what for me. My abuse didn't happen within the church, but I can relate to the abuses that these people under Mike Bickle had to deal with, and why they weren't able to speak out sooner. I mean, shame culture for one thing is horrible, and within purity culture, like in the Mike Bickle case, and I heard this. I think I heard this in the Robert Morris case too. It's all too common. In fact, it happens all the time. Married man has an affair with a minor under their control, and then they're like, but if we get caught, it's your fault because I'm a married man and I can't let it ruin my life. I can't abide by that. Abuse is abuse. It doesn't matter if the abuse is physical, spiritual, prophetic. Abuse is abuse. Manipulation is manipulation. I can't tolerate it. So I have an intolerance to certain types of intolerance because the aftermath is horrible. More on that later, a lot more on that later, simply because this is the direction that I'm moving in. There's a lot of people out there that are telling the history and the doctrines around what we're dealing with now. They're telling the history of the NAR, the New Apostolic Reformation. And I'm not saying I'm moving completely away from that. I'm just saying I'm going to be focusing more on real world work and put more quality into the productions that I do. Uh, and that means they're going to be spaced out more because I'm going to be working on other things. Because I need to get messages out there. I need to get people who don't have a reference point or haven't done their own therapy or are in denial to themselves that they need therapy because they've been gaslit all their lives. But that recovery and self acceptance part of the recovery and accepting that things have happened to you that aren't your fault because there are certain things that certain people can't consent to. I mean, children cannot consent to anything, which is why it's important that parents be good stewards of their children. Parents do not own their children; they're stewards of their children. Just like if you want to lean on the Bible, you go to the Book of Genesis, and it talks about how God made man the steward of the planet, of the world, which means we're supposed to take care of it. We're supposed to shelter it. We're not supposed to be robbing it of all the resources to make all the money we can get. And that's that. I'm just going to move right on because I'm just getting me off on a tirade that I really don't want to get into. I'm trying to get away from that. So, moving forward, what am I doing? Well, I'm going to get into the local networking part of it shortly, but I'm actively starting to work with state Congress here, working on establishing connections. I have one. I need to go ahead and cultivate more, but I've been so distracted by everything else that I'm having to carve some stuff away, which means I've chosen to move away from focusing so harshly on being so critical about things that so many people can look up for themselves. Who am I doing it for? There's a lot of classes out there. That's like the church histories class that I'm taking is built around taking an entire semester to explain how American Christianity and American politics both came to be and came to be so intertwined. It's been this way from the start. So that's something that I'll readdress later towards the end of the video. I got notes here, and this is going to be a long video. This is just because I got to get things off my heart. But I'm starting to work with state senate because of the testimonies that were dropped around Trey's law, which Trey's law is something that I'm going to look deeper into, but it's been inspired by Kanakuk Camps, which is billed as a Christian summer camp and a Christian sports camp. But they employed registered SOs. And boys got hurt. And Trey ended his own life because of it. So I'm going to look deeper into Trey's law, but from what I understand, it has to do with ending non-disclosure agreements when a CSA case is being addressed, which allows a minor victim to speak up for themselves and their story to be able to come out. The other thing that I'm working on, and I'm trying to make contact with the committee that heard the hearing, or that held the hearing, that heard the testimony. The Senate Judiciary Committee heard some testimony on Senate Bill 589, and two of the gals that testified there are victims of Mike Bickle at International House of Prayer in Kansas City, right here in Missouri, which has been a burr under my saddle for a while. I know I'm saying a lot. I'm trying mindfully to manage my language. So what SB 589 9 does is, oh, good grief, I just drew a blank on it. So, statute of limitations. SB 589 is statute of limitations, getting rid of the statute of limitations where CSA occurs. One of the victims was 12 years old, and she didn't remember until she was 52, well past the statute of limitations when it comes to that sort of abuse. Another individual was 14 when she fell victim to Mike Bickle. Another was 20 when she fell victim to Mike Bickle. The 14-year-old didn't remember until she was in the 50s. The average age of individuals who remember their childhood abuse is about 52. I wasn't aware of that fact until it was brought to the Senate hearing. And I was in my mid to late 40s when I finally got the gumption to tell my dad what happened to me as a child. But I couldn't bring it up until after my mom died. So, yeah, that's on par. That's on par. So that's why I do the things I do. So, moving on, hopefully I can get through the rest of this fairly quickly. Local work that I'm doing, I'm an Air Force vet. I was in logistics. I understand about warehousing resources. I was in mobility management, so I understand about mobility management. I understand about pre-prepping distributions. I understand about rapid response. When I was with the 819th Red Horse, combat engineers, Air Force combat engineers, stationed in England back in the late 80s, mid-late 80s, 84 to 87, in the Reagan years. We had a call-out protocol. Team 1 would have 12 hours to be airborne from the time we got a phone call. Team 2 would have to be off the ground within 24 hours. And then Team 3, which would be the last of us, would bring the last of the materials within 72 hours. Range of deployment from the British Isles to the Iron Curtain, from the fjords of Norway to the sand dunes of North Africa. So I got tasked with the responsibility of reorganizing our camping gear. And when I looked at the pack out list, I was like, wait, hold up. Y'all are sending out the advance team with tents and no tent poles, no cots, and to put their sleeping bags on that they're carrying with them, and no stoves in case they're going to a cold region. So I had the privilege of completely restructuring the entire call-out list, pack-out list, for the entire mobility management system for an entire squadron. It wasn't a huge squadron, 401 people, but you have to understand the focus of our mission and the fact that we were one of 4 squadrons in the world to handle the mission that we held. And I may do a video about my military experience at some point. I probably will. It's part of my past. That way I can get it out there and move on, like I'm trying to do. Because I got serious work to do. But anyway, I'm leaning into that organizational skill set that Uncle Sam taught me, and the connections that I'm developing through going to the seminary, studying church histories, and this spring, and then this fall I'm going to be doing that. Oh, hey, there's a squirrel running around up there on the gazebo with me. Cool. Oh, Mr. Squirrel. Anyway, this fall there's going to be a history of ecumenical cooperation, how denominations negotiated doctrinal minefields to advance a cooperative Christianity. So I'm taking that information because I'm meeting members from other denominations, which is another reason why I say doctrinal adherence is important to a point, but it can become an obsession. I'm tired of being obsessed with stuff other than helping people. is why I'm doing what I'm doing. I am affiliated, at least loosely at the moment, with an organization here in St. Louis known as Metropolitan Congregations United. We are a faith-based organization that does good works for our neighbors. That's our focus. We don't care what denomination you come from, as long as you're not a hateful, spiteful individual that's pushing some serious dogma that just wants to do good things like, I don't know, make the St. Louis public schools abide by the get the lead out of the water law of 2023 and put lead mitigation filtration systems into the public school drinking water and water systems. Lead filtration, it's an add-on. It's law. They haven't done it. We want them to do it because children who have lead in their environment, lead in their bodies, are less likely to be able to, well, lead in the body causes learning disabilities. People, yeah, I'm going to wander if I get too far off of that. But NCU, one of our member congregations, is working on building a food network. They're trying to find out which churches in town have food banks that have an overabundance of food, and churches that are trying to provide support for their local neighborhoods that don't have enough food, or they're in a food desert, so that the churches with abundance can help the churches that are in need, so that the communities that have abundance can help the communities that are in need. Loving one another, helping your neighbors. That's a doctrine that I'm willing to support. Love one another. That said, the particular congregation that I'm involved in, and I happen to know that there are several other congregations that are involved with MCU, are interested in helping homeless people, which is why I'll get to that in a moment. I'm working on building a homeless advocacy network here, in expanding the network here in Columbia. There's churches that are trying to do things for the homeless, and there are groups or actual organizations that are doing good things to help the homeless. But some of these groups are running short on resources like food, hot water. It's either too hot or not hot enough. So temperature regulations, complaints I heard, just little things. But given the neighborhood this particular organization is in, I understand. But I think I can connect them with help to improve their situation, and to be able to help improve their services, as well as helping the local congregations that want to help their neighbors locally fulfill that desire. Trying to connect people with people, that networking, sheltering and services, advocacy training. I'm trying to work with the shelter because I'm looking to get peer support training as well as homeless advocacy training. It just so happens that this particular organization, and I'll do something on them later when something's more officially established, but I appreciate what they do, trust me, or I wouldn't be reaching out to them. To try to see if they can help me get this homeless advocacy training into a class setting, a classroom type setting. And my home church is willing to host that class. And so I can reach out through MCU and invite other churches. They can send a representative even. Invite people from the local community that want to get involved, that don't necessarily want to be associated with a church for whatever reason, because they believe in a Buddhist philosophy or whatever. It doesn't matter. They just want to help their neighbor, right? They want to be an empathic human being. They just want to be good. They'd be more than welcome to join. They're not going to be discriminated against. One of the reasons that I feel like I have some room to be able to breathe and move in the direction that I'm most comfortable in is because not only is the seminary class built to explain the history of Christian nationalism, but the Zoom meetings that I've started going to on Thursdays is also put together to discuss the history of Christian nationalism. And so there is definitely a conversation about the history going on. Sure. They're missing a lot of the esoteric gaps. They're missing the Alice Bailey and Helena Blavatsky connections. And I'm finding those are more useful to people who are in the process of deconstructing or need to have those things to be able to deconstruct. But I'm to a point where I think actions speak louder than words, which is another reason why I'm moving into this action phase, especially in the local community. And it's working well because my reputation precedes me. I'm finding that people want to work with me because I want to help people. That said, the idea that I have done comparative cult studies and that I openly admit that I've walked away from several cults provided me a developing friendship that I want to focus more time into. And I can't do that doing things the way I have been. So stuff's got to change. She's transgender, and she grew up in a cult, a tiny little cult. And I've had a lot of good conversations with her. And I understand where she believes that her dad had good intentions. And she recognizes where her dad went off the rails. But he had good intentions. He didn't mean to hurt anybody. But it was a tiny little group. And like I said, I'll discuss that more later. I think Yaya and I have discussed sitting down and doing a recorded conversation, especially around the idea of how the purity culture doctrine that she was raised under quite probably had some impact on a lot of the mentality that led her to this transgender state in her life experience and her life adventure. That's what life is. It's a journey. So there's plenty of the Christian nationalism conversation going on. I feel like I can back off on that. Don't have to grind so hard. I'm still going to work on it because I'm a historian and an anthropologist. That said, I'm not real happy about the attacks that libraries and museums are coming under this 47th administration of the United States of America. That's a whole other battle. That's real life versus digital life, which gets me into this next thing, which hopefully I can wrap up even quicker. So we've got John 13, 34 and 35, talking about love one another as I have loved you. By these works they will know you are my followers. And Matthew 25, 31 through 40, where Jesus said, I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty. You know the passage. Or if you don't, I suggest that you go look it up. King James might be difficult to read. ESV, the English Standard Version, is a pretty good version for the layperson. Version, but I'm not comfortable with it yet. So, but it's the NRSV updated edition. So the NRSV UE. I'm not familiar with it yet, but it's something that I was introduced to at the seminary. So this is one of the problems I've been running into with heresy hunting. There's just a lot of people that are locked into these dogmatic ideologies and are dogmatic with their ideologies. And by dogmatic, I mean this ideological lockstep that a certain thing has to be done a certain way. This is why I'm looking forward to this history of ecumenical cooperation in the future, because I come from a pretty radical version of Christianity They want to take over the world right now. They're trying. Fortunately, they're getting a lot of pushback, which is another reason why I feel like I can shift my focus through stuff. So I've come to believe that biblical literalism is one of those things that I can put in the category of extremism. And when I put it in that category, it means it's dangerous, because extremism of anything is dangerous. I don't believe that the Bible is the literal, infallible Word of God. I was raised with that. I now recognize it as a library. It's a collection of books, and therefore I refer to it as such. It's okay to compare the books, but it's kind of like, what's a good analogy that I can bring up? It'd be like trying to compare which Anne Rice fandom movie is the most accurate translation of Anne Rice's intent of her vampire story. And there's not going to be any one particular translation based on the original texts that's going to be the infallible translation, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the Bible. I'm not saying it's fake, but it's not historically accurate either. As a historian and anthropologist, one who's willing to look at historical records from various cultures, and compare them to each other to try to figure out what the overarching story was. How did we can look in the Bible and we can see how the people of Judah felt about the Sumerians or any of the other cultures around them. We can look at how Western culture, specifically Western European culture or European culture, has imposed itself on other parts of the world because they felt like they were the right way to be, rather than investigating what people think and trying to find the commonalities. When I was attending college, I had a rather interesting conversation with a guy who grew up on a Cherokee reservation. And at that time, I was deep into my studies around my Irish heritage, and I was looking at the culture. And we got to comparing notes back and forth about the we folk of the Cherokee people versus the we folk of the Irish. And we don't know which came first, or if they evolved separately, or if there might have been Irish explorers, because the Irish people got around. That's why there's an Irish pub in every town. If maybe some Irish explorers made it to North America and communed, broke bread with the Cherokee people well before Leif Erikson showed up. We don't know. We don't have those records. We can't say for sure. So I'm leaning more into what I can prove, which is currently what some people are trying to do to others and what others need to help get out of the situation they're in so they can stop being targets of the people that are attacking them. So that gets me to the point of weaponized religion, which is actually the core of the research that John Collins and Charles Paisley have been doing over there at Leaving the Message, along with so many of the people that they work with. I highly recommend you go there. If you really want to know the history, go check them out. If you want to learn how some of the esoteric stuff weaseled its way in, go check out Laura over at Magical Mystery Church. If you want to know where people are going wrong with the doctrines and the drama between the MAGA false prophets and the doctrinal adherents, because doctrine does matter. If you're an adherent to a faith system, whatever that faith system is, doctrine does matter. And so I'm not faulting them, because according to their book, which is Still a good book. I just really love one another as I have loved you. For by these works they will know you are my followers. I still believe in the Bible. I just don't believe in it like I used to. I don't see it the same way. But I've studied enough of the history that I know that I can steer people to other individuals that are already doing the work. Whenever I'm sitting in a group and they mention, I don't know, Mike Bickle, or I'm sorry, it was Mark Driscoll was mentioned by the leader of the Zoom meeting yesterday, and then she's like, and Jerry, you mentioned somebody, and I'm like, oh yeah, I can give you a whole list of them. We got the list I work from. If you've been, I don't know. I do most of my work in a conservative environment, and I'm moving further away from that mission field, and I don't feel bad about it because at the end of the day, MAGA is a cult. That's all there is to it. But anyway, religion has been weaponized, and I understand how it's been done. I can explain it to people, but I can't give it to them in the bite-sized answers they want. Months ago, my girlfriend asked me, how did you break out of purity culture? I'm still answering that question for her. She's shocked. She's absolutely shocked. But the way religion has been weaponized can be seen in like Jim Jones and David Koresh. People know about those things. You can look at Ken Copeland and his quote, who's the biggest loser in the Bible? God is, not Satan. He's got his own justifications for that. We can look at Lance Wallnau and his Seven Mountains Mandate. We can look at C. Peter Wagner and his coining of the New Apostolic Reformation and Christian Dominionism, and I can keep grinding on all the actors within the Empower 21 movement, that whole global Christian Dominionist movement. I could spend my time breaking down all these people. Or I could spend my time advocating on individuals who have fell victim to domestic and sexual violence and human trafficking and the homeless. I could spend my time actually helping other people. Actively helping other people. I would rather spend my time that way. So what I'm getting at is love your neighbor. Wait a minute. Maybe I didn't write it down. There's one other thing. One other thing I need to mention before I move into the last section and close out. And that's QAnon versus Blue Anon versus reality. Wow, it's getting up. I think it's supposed to cloud up later, and I think they're calling for storms. But anyway, I could not understand QAnon. The thing about them that really hurt my brain was them using numerology and trying to apply decimalized numerology to a Hebraic practice called gematria to supposedly somehow decode secret messages from some super cryptic insider, and it hurt my brain. It hurt my brain. All the coded language. QAnon is straight up cult. They grind on getting into these facts. They grind on these articles. How we know this, how we know that. We have this article over here on the National File, and Fox News was talking about this, and it's been a while since. Oh, Gateway Pundit. Gateway Pundit was another one. We've got all of our sources, and yeah, they do. And I see the same thing with Blue Anon, which is basically the left-wing version. They get running down these conspiracy theory rabbit holes, and I find it challenging to try to interact with them because it triggers me as far as referencing these conspiracy theories. I need to pause again. All right, so you're obviously going to see an edit there, a cut. Got into a wonderful conversation with somebody, and then the weather started moving in, so that's why I'm in the car instead of sitting outside. But as I recall, I was talking about QAnon, Blue Anon, and reality. There are plenty of conspiracies. That's for darn sure. But there's also reality, and I've gotten to a point where I just I have a very low tolerance for conspiracy theory. I enjoy conspiracy fact, but I've gotten to a point where chasing those down has gotten to be mundane. I'm wanting to go in a different direction. So, reality versus whatever. So there we go. Memory. What is memory? This is our closing section here. What is memory? Memory is being able to remember facts for what they are. Sometimes those are uncomfortable. Memory is being able to remember stories and putting those stories together with those facts. Sometimes those stories and those facts may be used to build characters, to shape characters or personas. So then you get things like Donald Trump as King Cyrus. All right? That's just not the thing. That's not reality. So when digging into history, when finding facts like William Branham worked with Nazis and Klansmen, that's undeniable. That's just simply undeniable. But those are dangerous facts because they directly weaken the Christian nationalist movement. Just like the facts about Mormonism destroys Mormonism. Just like the facts about... Anyway. Dangerous memories like Jim Jones was originally ordained in the Assembly of God Church and was raised up by William Branham. Oral Roberts was also raised up by William Branham. So these are dangerous memories. Andy Jackson, President Andy Jackson, signing the Indian Removal Act of 1830. That's an uncomfortable fact about American history, but just because you know it doesn't mean you hate America. It just means that, in my opinion, if you're a good heart and a positive mindset, that you're going to recognize that those things happened in hopes to avoid them in the future. You know, kind of like that never forget quote outside of Auschwitz. Anyway, keep your eyes open, folks. There's a lot of protests that are scheduled around the country, taking a stand against Musk, taking a stand against Trump. There's a lot of legislation going on. There's individuals looking for and politicians trying to help them find the accountability that we need of these abusive people that are within the system. Anyway, be peaceful. Be peaceful. Don't be breaking stuff. Like MLK said, be a nuisance. Don't break stuff. All that said, mental health matters, man. Take care of yourself and each other. Fight evil. Read books. That's plural.